I want to know why I'm the elder statesman.
Well, as some of my good friends have told me, that's because you've earned it. And you've been through the fire, and they couldn't take you down. You've endured the experience, and you're still telling stories. And there's examples of people like Damian that you've invested in that are continuing to tell that narrative of how the two of you are connected. So that's why you're the elder statesman.
All right, I'll accept that. Thank you.
So why don't we start off with that? Give me a quick recap of what you've seen and the dynamic as it's changed over the last couple years within the industry of asset allocation, money, capital to businesses from your perspective at Ariel.
Sure, happy to do that, and thanks for having me here, folks. If we roll back the clock to prior to the murder of George Floyd, very different dynamic. Capital, to your point, the stats you were driving at, was continuing to go down. And it ran in fits and starts in terms of the capital that was allocated to people of color, particularly black folks, over the course of the last 20 so years or so. There had been some fits and starts. Some of it our own doing, much of it the lack of understanding of what it is that we were trying to do on the part of the mainstream funding community. But post the murder of George Floyd, a lot of folks came out and said, we want to do more with the black community, we want to do more with people of color. Words are great. Getting them to actually live up to those words is always a difficult challenge. But it's what motivated us to do what we're doing today, which is to have started Ariel Alternatives, which is in the business of hopefully creating some scalable, predominantly black-owned businesses that can change the narrative around how people view us, right? Because historically, we've been viewed as small and disadvantaged, which is the history of black businesses, right? 124,000 black-owned businesses, 95% of which have revenues of less than $5 million. You always need a helping hand. What you really need is just access to the capital and access to the customers, right? We'll take care of the rest ourselves, but we were always small and disadvantaged. Our notion is to change that narrative into large and advantaged and able to compete with just about anybody out there so long as we are given a fair shot at that competition. Hence Damian.
Well, you were taking me exactly where I wanted to go, is that Damian was one of your investments.
Correct.
And oftentimes one of the things we think about is the network opportunity, but then also the leadership that needs to be in the room in order to be able to identify these opportunities. So as everybody is sitting here thinking about capital allocation and what you've seen throughout your experience, how did you all end up at the place where you are, and how did the relationship develop with Damian?
So some of it is altruistic, and some of it is sort of a desire to do good. The other part of it is purely mercantile and mercenary, right? I mean, if you look at the statistics, in 1990, I think the non-white population in the US was 24%. In 2022, that's now 42%, right? So we're growing in numbers. Now, the black population hasn't grown as proportionately at that great a rate. It's gone from like 11 to 12 and change, 12.9, 12.8. But the numbers continue to grow in terms of who the folks are that now have the checkbook, the pocketbook, and the folks that you're going to have to do business with. It's hard for me to understand why the mainstream community doesn't get the fact that that is their customer base, right? We are their customer base, right? And so if they want to do business with us, they got to find ways to do business with us, not only to take the money, but to give us the money.
So Damian, how'd you convince Les to give you some cash?
I think, as Les mentioned, it started with an alignment on mission, right? We are My Code Media. We're a multicultural media and marketing company. And our ambition, right, is to ensure that everyone has an opportunity, particularly in America, to be accurately and fully represented, right, in media and marketing, et cetera. And we want to do that at a massive scale, not in little pockets, not just the little crumb that is assigned, but as Les was just talking about, where the diverse community is becoming the majority. So it should be that size company, that size of impact, that size of contribution. And that's where we matched up. we were doing the work, working in media and marketing, trying to get this work to take place, bringing in creators, facilitating publishers, creating opportunity. And Les, Aerial Alternatives and Project Black, said, well, shouldn't this be bigger? Shouldn't this not just be a small to medium-sized company and serving as at the level that it can? Shouldn't it be a billion-dollar organization or multi-billion-dollar organization serving everybody that is in the Fortune 100 or the Fortune 500? Because that actually is what needs to happen from a scale perspective. That mission alignment, along with us doing the work and building infrastructure, et cetera, is the cornerstone of the partnership. We can't do what we want to do without it. And we were lucky to find Aerial Investments, and they were very gracious and diligent about evaluating us. And we are incredibly excited about what we can do together, taking us to the next level so that it's not just a one-off kind of idea of a company, but an actual enterprise that stands the test of time and impacts the entire culture.
So give some perspective as to how the company started, really the capital that you brought in, and then when that moment working with Aerial took it to the next level. Give people some perspective of numbers.
My code was bootstrapped right from the start, and is going into its 10th year. And we built from very little, starting out in the Hispanic space, then growing into the Black space, the AAPI space, and then Pride. We are now a 100 million plus company from a revenue perspective, and that is the exact inflection point where Aerial Investments came in to say, well, how quickly can we be a 500 million? How quickly can we be $1 billion?
Well, y'all can give him a round of applause for that. Now, Courtney, when a lot of people come to Kickstarter, they may not have that same type of, destination, but they start somewhere. So give everybody a little bit of perspective of the point of differentiation that Kickstarter has had on the diverse community of founders and where opportunities have gone and hopefully ended up like Damian.
Has anybody here heard of Issa Rae? She funded Awkward Black Girl on Kickstarter. Kickstarter, I like to call it a marketplace of ideas. You have an idea, you can build a community, and you can bring your idea to life. That's really the idea behind Kickstarter and creative crowdfunding at its core. You can come to check out Market Fit. You can do limited runs. You can see what's going to work, and if your passion can become a reality through our platform. And so essentially it's all about bringing that idea to life, getting the funding through the community that you build, and then ultimately taking it to the next level, like a My Code, and taking it to the level of working with an Aerial, and Les, and getting that type of mentorship to take it to the top tier. But we have companies that also use us as part of their brand proposition and part of their business proposition. We have companies that come back and do a lot of limited runs, and they may do direct to consumer, Amazon sales, things like that are really large companies. We had not a Black founder, but if anybody here has heard of Brandon Sanderson, he did a campaign that made 42 million. So the opportunity is there if you can get the community to back it.
Little known fact, Issa Rae and her brother Malik Diop, we went to school together.
Oh, there you go.
So that was one of my misses. I'm just being honest, I've known Issa and Malik for a long time, and I remember when she first started doing some of her YouTube videos, and I was just amazed at what she was doing. But I was also, I think, a little bit naive, or also a little bit green in my investment space. I played football for a while, so I was really only cued into the quarterback, so to speak, and not really looking at some of my peers and my constituents in terms of what they were doing in this world. And I'm just very proud of what she's doing, but the fact that she started on Kickstarter is phenomenal, and she's one of the best now. And Paul, you too, Dr. Judge, I have to make sure you give him his flowers, have had an interesting pathway as well. You didn't start on Kickstarter, you started off a different way.
Indeed. I I started off as just a computer nerd, like figuring out how to program computers and solve problems. And over 20 years, we've built a few different software companies, enterprise IT typically, that we would grow and build out enterprise customers and then have those companies be acquired. And then, we took one public. And then after that, I realized, like, wait a second, I feel like I've seen the mountaintop. I've seen what the tech ecosystem can do in terms of job creation, in terms of wealth creation, and I made it my mission to tell as many of us, hey, we need to build companies here, you need to learn software development, you need to pursue entrepreneurship. And so I see a few people in the room that we've helped build companies over the years. And then what I also realized was, well, look, building companies is hard enough as it is. To do it as a minority is even harder because of this lack of access to capital. And so 4 years ago, we started a fund called Open Opportunity Fund, just focused 100% on funding Black and Latino tech entrepreneurs. And the first fund of that was a $100 million fund that we've invested in 75 companies that are founded by Black and Latinos, and we're busy doing more of that and raising more capital to keep trying to solve that same problem you're talking about.
So was it challenging when you were talking to people about your background and how you got to where you are, and them believing that they could do it?
You think about the tech industry, sometimes it's like magic beans, right? Because when it works, the scalability that you get, you can write some software once and solve a problem for one person, then it works for 10 people and 100 people and 1,000 people, and you start to have that hockey stick when it works of tens of millions and hundreds of millions of revenue, and then valuations that go into numbers that we typically don't hear in traditional industries. And so oftentimes it is interesting to kind of convince someone of that. But then once you get into it, it comes with all these challenges, right? I think of it like a roller coaster. It's ups and downs. Like 1 week is like, I'm killing it. The next week is killing me. I'm killing it. And so surviving that for the 7 to 10 years that it takes to build a business, you have to find something you're really passionate about. Like you're really going to dedicate an entire chapter of your life to solving that particular problem. And so that's one of the keys. It's not just a fascination with the industry, but really finding a problem that you're attached to that you really want to spend a chapter of your life solving.
Damian, what about yourself? As you've built your business, I'm sure you've met people along the way, and it seems to me, I've owned 2 creative agencies, and it seemed like the service industry of creativity is a usual place where we start, Black folks start. Why did you start in the creative sector? And when you listen to Paul thinking about the world of technology, can you understand why sometimes it might be a little bit challenging? Or how did you talk to people to convince them that while creative might be good for you, it may not be good for you, you might be able to go in technology?
You're talking about Kickstarter?
Well, I was talking to Damian, yeah.
Okay.
Interestingly, we started with both. We started out trying to make a technical infrastructure that could deliver advertising at scale specifically to a community of people that weren't being reached. And then said, well, if we're going to do that, we're going to have to tell those stories correctly. We're going to have to speak to them correctly and need that creative element. So I think the tech was right in the very beginning of what we were doing, because we started out in the digital space and said, this is the easiest and fastest way to reach these folks, the most efficient, and the easiest way for us to build, right? So I think you're right. Where the wheelhouse tends to be, right, is in that creative space, like, oh, we need to bring culture to this. And I think that there's a magic in trying to marry that with what actually creates infrastructure and foundation that you can build upon. Everything needs to be scalable if you want it to be big, right? If you want to go from it works for one person to 10 people to 100,000 people to 10 million people. And so we actually started there as well. How can we start with just a couple, just a couple of publishers, just a couple of sites that we want to deliver their ads for them and sell that, right, as access to the Hispanic community or the Black community. And how can we make sure that by the time we're 2,500 publishers, it is still working as smoothly, it is still delivering the value that they're paying us for.
Courtney, how do you keep people motivated? As a CMO of Kickstarter, I'm sure you hear plenty of stories of how people started their business and the challenges that they've essentially been through. And as you hear Paul and Damian talk about the communities of which they've supported, if you will, and motivated, how does the story of Kickstarter and how do you help those that are in the business of starting their business, how do you keep them motivated moving forward?
Well, I think that, first of all, Kickstarter was started, our founder wanted to put on a concert and was trying to figure out, how do I put on this concert? How do I put this concert on in New Orleans and get people to pay for it? He decided, I can do that through a platform where I have people donate money to me, and then I can get this concert kicked off. So it came from a creative idea. And so it's always been embedded in the thought, in the thinking of we're all about making these creative ideas come to life. What we've evolved into is technology and other types of ideas as well. But in terms of keeping people motivated, what we try to do is constantly improve on the technology and improve on the ways that they can continue to raise money on the platform. A big part of Everett Taylor joining and then hiring me is to really bring brand awareness to this platform. We're 15 years old this year, and I think what's happened is at a certain point, we started in 2009 in Brooklyn, and there were a lot of parties and a lot of people, doing campaigns on Kickstarter that did really well, and you'd hear about them, TLC, De La Soul, and music, and things like that. And then you didn't hear about it so much. So really, one of the ways that we, I think, do that is just by motivating them, by giving them awareness that there's even this alternative funding platform that you can use that's pretty simple to get started on. It doesn't cost you anything. It just means you need an idea, and you need to pull together a campaign to get that idea off the ground. So we try to make it as seamless as possible, and we provide the support, the support lens once you get into the platform to try to make sure that you're successful.
Do you find as though that a lot of the black companies that start on Kickstarter are supported by black folks?
A lot of people are friends and family, supported by friends and family. And so yes, I would say that, but I think that goes for everybody. Most people are supported by their friends and family. What we're really trying to get into now is more the performance marketing space to help people learn how to market their ideas on their own. And we're providing services for folks, which we've just started in more of a beta, but we are going to scale that platform, that service as well for the platform, so that users have an opportunity to start to market their ideas and get people, drive them to their campaign pages in order to pledge money towards their.
Because a lot of people talk about, as a black founder or having a black investment firm, sometimes it's difficult to get capital in. You think about the communities of which have capital, and oftentimes our community may not have enough in people's eyes to get off the ground. How, Les, did you all navigate that at Ariel? Or how does what I said sit with you? When you think about the landscape of where you all have been and where you all are going, and ultimately how more people can invest, if you will?
It's a great question. I mean, and this may sound cliched and trite, but you got to think bigger than you are, right? I mean, you have to think really big, but start really small. So my background before Ariel Alternatives, I started a company called Hamilton Lane. Most of you don't know it. No reason that you would know it if you're not.
Baltimore.
Philadelphia, close enough.
Close.
But Hamilton Lane was a startup, like any other startup. Me in a 10 by 12 foot office without a window and one PC, and it's now an NYSE listed company. It's got a $10 billion market cap. So you start thinking about where you want to wind up, but recognize that you got to start small, and you got to think about not limiting yourself to how it is you might think you don't belong or don't deserve. Right? You really got to believe. Right? So it's mindset more than anything else.
So the question of belief is a generational one that most people might sort of think about, right? How did you believe in yourself?
So I'm slightly different in that I wasn't born in this country, so I don't have the multi-generational historical narrative that many folks have, that in some ways can be self-limiting if you can't take yourself outside of that narrative. I'm from the Caribbean, right? I didn't know I was black until I moved to New York, right? I mean, But once you find that out, then for me, the object of the exercise was, how do I learn the rules of the game better than anybody else, and how do I play the game better than anybody else? Easy to say, and I appreciate that it's very easy to say, but that was my mindset, right? I started off, it didn't take rocket science to figure out that Hamilton Lane was a minority-owned company, but I didn't want to end up being a minority-owned company. I wanted to be a company. I mean, we did what we do as well, if not better than anybody else. It happens to be that we are minority owned at the outset. We will exploit that to hell and high water given the opportunity, as everyone should exploit every opportunity they're presented. But at the end of the day, the object of the exercise was not to stay a minority owned company, but to be competing for a piece of the pie that everybody competes for. Right? I didn't want the set aside. I didn't want the 15%. I didn't want to be small and disadvantaged. I didn't want to be the tag along that everybody wanted to bring along to help them get a contract from somebody else because they needed some diversity. I wanted to be the one to drive that. And if I was able to do that, then I would be the one to also drive how that trickled down to the rest of the community, right? Because it's, if you're a tier 1 vendor, you get to decide who your own vendors are, and you get to decide where you're going to spend the money, and it's going to be with people you like.
Can I just add to that? Because
Sure.
You sparked something in me, Les, when you were saying that. My parents were born in the segregated South, and I think what you talked about, that self-limiting belief, is something that I think about a lot. And I think that, a story my father would always talk about, moths trying to reach like the lamp post, the light post, and if the one moth that kept trying and the moths were saying, you can't reach, and he said, yeah, but if I get higher, I'm still higher than all of you. I've tried, I have limitless thinking, and I think that's what's so important. I think the whole idea of what we're even talking about today is so impactful because it's the idea that we don't put ourselves in that box. We're not a monolith. People can't put us in a box. Les's experience is different than my experience, but people may see us still as Black people when we walk in the room, but the idea is that we're not limiting ourselves. And I think that regardless of how you choose to fund your business or think about your business, it's the idea that you have limitless thinking, you're futuristic, and you're thinking about how you grow and thinking beyond where you are right now.
But we're all here.
But the fact is, in the 70s and 80s, minority-held companies that were in and affiliated with the U.S. government were places where a lot of people got started, right? And if you've seen sort of the rise and fall and the rise and the sharp decline, now as we're in a little bit of a challenged position, especially as we think about the minority diaspora as being Black, but now the minority shift towards the Latino population, right? So things are slowly diversifying, if you will, to use a good term. But Paul, as you, Dr. Judge, Dr. Paul Judge, were you unapologetically Black when you started your business, or did you go into it saying, I'm going to crush this company? And how did that inform your decision of where you all are today with your current fund?
Great question. Look, I went to Morehouse College, so we're around the table. All right, there we go.
We'll give you all some time later.
There we go.
Y'all can do that Morehouse thing.
The best homecoming is coming up in a couple of weeks, and so we're
But at Howard? I heard it was at Howard.
There you go. All right. But I'll tell you, all of that, right? We all experienced this environment where we were surrounded by Black excellence. And then I went to grad school at Georgia Tech. And when I got there, I was a minority, not because I was Black, but because I was American. Because suddenly I'm competing against my colleagues from Asia and China and India. And I got slapped in the face with the reality of like this global competitive playing field. And you had to realize really quickly, like, okay, if I want to be one of the best, it's not about a local game. It's not like, am I the best on campus? It's like, am I the best in the world? And if I'm gonna chase an industry that's big enough, everybody's gonna come out from all over the world. It's like the Olympics. Like everyone's gonna send their best athletes to win that industry. And so you have to decide if you're gonna be one of the best athletes in your sport across the globe. And so I learned to approach it like that. And then from there, you mentioned this thing of this lack of trust, right? That happens in the Black community. We have this hesitation to work together. And to your point, it's not accidental. We were trained to do that for centuries, right? So that the system could work as they wanted the system to work. And so now we have to not only realize that, but counteract that. And so oftentimes that's about how do we put other people in position, right? How do we collaborate and how do we work together to be kind of long-term greedy, right? And there's amazing examples. I can look across the room. I remember I met Scooter a decade ago. He was a student at Morehouse, right? And so he came in and we worked together in a company. Now he's leading a great company called Top Bar. And I remember meeting Cedric. Cedric was working at Apple. And it's like, you're great at tech, now it's time for you to be a creator and be your own CEO. Now he's running this amazing company, Culture Genesis, and then sometimes we need help. So then a couple months ago, I called Shaka. Shaka Rashid had been at Citadel and Lazard and raised billions of dollars for majority white funds. I said, hey, we're trying to build a meaningful fund focused on Black and Latinos. We know the size of this problem. This problem is a $20 billion a year problem. We need that same expertise focused on helping solve this problem. And Shaka left Wall Street and came and joined us at Open Opportunity Fund. And so if you think about not only kind of how you aim to be the best, but how do you kind of create a team and surround yourselves, I think of it sometimes like the X-Men, right? Like how do we get the best of the best together so we can tackle these problems? And that's what it takes. We can't do it alone, so we need this type of collaboration.
So when you think about your fund, how did you organize your team based upon your relationships? How did you sort of decipher and say, well, I want to have a diverse team, I'm a Black-led fund, I'm also thinking about how do I bring other perspectives to the table? I think if we were to reverse field and say, a lot of primary funds have a lot of white founders and they bring a lot of their white teams, but at the same time we say you need to diversify. How do you take the language of diversification as a Black fund and diversify as well?
I think the first step for me was, my partner and co-founder of the fund is a gentleman, Marcelo Clare. He's Bolivian, right? So he's Latino, and we've been friends for years. And the week after of George Floyd, to your point, he sent me a message. And he's like, Paul, we need to do something. And at the time, he was CEO of SoftBank Group. And he said, hey, I'll have SoftBank commit as an LP for $100 million to build this fund. Would you help run it? And if you ever met Marcelo, that happens through a WhatsApp message. I say yes, and then literally the next day, we're on TV at CNBC announcing the fund. And so it opened my eyes to the perspective of how many the shared challenges that the Black community and Latino community have in common, right? And how, again, we talk about collaboration across those. And so that was one element, right? Kind of how do we bring together the force of the Black and Latino community? 30% of the country's population, right? But only 2 to 3% of the venture capital funding. And then from there, when you get into functional areas, I think it just comes down, you need the best of the best. Right? You need the best people in value creation. After you invest in a company, how are we going to help you build relationships with consumers, build relationships with corporations? How are we going to help you get ready for your next round? Think about things like net revenue retention and all the things that matter, the technical details. But now if you have an open aperture and say, hey, I'm going to find the best of the best, but I'm going to make sure I give a shot and go recruit at HBCUs. I'm going to make sure I go find people that have been in traditional industries and introduce them to the high-tech industry. We just naturally end up with a diverse team that are extremely talented.
Les, how do you think about it with Ariel?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, listen, part of the beauty of these kinds of convenings is that we can all look around the room and say, hey, there are a lot of us chasing similar dreams, having similar technical skills, similar practical experiences, whatever it happens to be. Oftentimes, if you're out in the broader community, it feels like a very lonely journey, right? I mean, you don't see a whole lot of folks that look like you around the table. There's a whole lot of conversation around it, not much execution around it. But when you come to these, it's energizing, right? I mean, it sort of gives you a belief that there is a lot greater opportunity. There are a lot more of us with a set of skills and experiences that can be brought to bear to accomplish an intended outcome and get there very successfully. And to Paul's point, sharing that ground, sharing that vision, sharing that understanding becomes an important piece of how it is we build our own network and community and share that pie. Because often, my generation, and I will accept the Eminence Glee's elder statesman label here, but many times folks in my generation were the first to ever accomplish something, and they were going to be incredibly protective of whatever they got. right? Yeah, they loved you, you were a great person, but get away from mine, right? We got to get way beyond that, right? And recognize that there is enough there for everybody. And so for us, at Aerial Alternatives, man, the success for us is defined by a large number of competitors doing the same thing we're doing. We just happen to be first and hopefully the best, right? I mean, that will define success.
Damian, you were going to say something.
I think there's really something important about your question about how you think about diversity or inclusivity. I think it's very personal to your organization and how you want to put things together. And every organization has the opportunity to do that, to take a look at what does inclusion look like for us? What do we need from the purpose of actually making the business actually sustainable and grow? What do we want to foster in terms of who is working here and what perspectives we bring in? And it's incredibly important that founders, leadership teams, people who are in the position to make those kinds of decisions actively take an intentional role about it. It's shift and evolution, change at this scale simply doesn't happen by accident. It actually requires framework, systemization, institutionalization. You talked about, okay, we're deciding now we're going to go recruit at HBCUs. That's not a small project, right? There has to be organization system around it. When we think in the multicultural marketing space, I lead a team of cultural strategists. We all can't have the same view because the Black audience is not a monolith. We have to create systems and opportunities and institutionalize that infrastructure so that there isn't a future where we fall back into the rut of being exclusive. There needs to be that continual process where we ask ourselves, what am I not thinking of? What do I need to do next? Because there simply won't be the change we want if we leave it to chance.
Can I get an amen?
Courtney, just switching gears real fast, how do corporations sort of help with that narrative, especially with the companies that are coming in through Kickstarter, if you will, or how have you seen companies and corporations help with your work?
Well, since I think our executive team is so diverse now, we are attracting a lot more diverse projects on the platform, which I'm very excited about. I'll just say that I think in terms of, I can just speak about my own particular thoughts on diversity too. I think everyone deserves a seat at the table. And I think that seat at the table needs to be diversity of thought, like Damian's speaking about, because we are not the monolith, but also diversity of gender, age, sexual orientation. Background is very important because those diverse perspectives will take us to the future. And as we think about having that, to your point, you start to attract that. And you start to attract that type of talent. You start to attract that type of business on your platform because they feel like, oh, you're open for business here. So I think we're successfully doing that. I would say that, in the almost 2 years I've been at Kickstarter, our diversity quotient has gone up. The meter has definitely risen, and when you look at the diverse projects on the platform, you see that as well.
Have you guys started any innovative, ways of which to include more people, diversified ways in order to help different businesses? What unique strategies have you all instituted at Kickstarter?
We have something called Forward Funds. So that's specifically set up to help fund diverse businesses be successful on the platform. So it may mean that we can help you with your marketing. We can help you finish your funds. You may be almost at funding goal. We can help you close that gap. And we set up, there might like micro grants, and we do that for women. We might do that for Black tech creators. We do them for a variety of different types of cohorts that come onto the platform.
Damian, do you all have new types of technologies, new types of initiatives that you all have put forth with some of the corporate partners that you might have, but then also through your company?
Something new every quarter, because we need to. Part of what we are in the business of is building ecosystem, right? So the reality for us is if there aren't Black, brown, Asian creators out in the world, creating audience and creating opportunity, we don't survive, and neither do they. We want our system to drive down into them. So we come up with ideas to enable and support the kind of work that they're doing, and how we can better prepare them for the market, how we can be an advocate in addition to being a partner, and then present that wholesale to our corporate partners. Look the kind of work that we're doing. Sometimes it really is transactional, right? Where a brand will say, I want to reach these people, you got them, here's some money, right? But other times, there are organizations that like we do, want to be aligned mission-wise. And they have the same kind of intentionality. They want to support Black tech creators, or they want to support the Hispanic community in growing in one segment or another. And we present not only what we offer, but then also try to match that with what they offer to make a synergistic opportunity.
So I hope everybody's taking some notes, because there's going to be a test afterwards. No? Okay, fine. We've gotten so many amazing notes that I've just mentally been taking through our discussion. But as we kind of get closer to the close, one question that I always think about is, as a founder and as a leader within a diversified company, what keeps me up at night? What keeps you motivated and moving forward? Aside from the obvious, because you want to support others. I want the 10 years down the road big picture as to like why you're doing what you're doing, and why, some people in here might be funders of yours, some people in here might be new employees of yours, some people in here might be new clients of yours. Everybody's tied to the story of the reason why. But not just the reason why today, but the reason why tomorrow and into the future. So as you think about your organization, what's the reason why, and what's the big picture for the future? Damian.
Let's start with me. Okay. What keeps me up at night? The real answer is what this business and the value creation in it is going to look like in 10 years, in 15 years. And are we going to be nimble and responsive enough to meet where the audience is going, or where the industry is going? There used to, back in the day, there was, I don't know if you guys remember, there were these accessories kind of plaques and posters, little sayings on them in a drawing. One of the ones that resonated with me when I was a young employee was, a bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn. And that's actually what I think about all the time. Are we paying attention enough to where the industry might be going in 4 and 5 years, so that we can make the turn, see the turn, and try to get there? Because if we don't, all the work that we do to try to get to scale and be delivering an economy inside of this industry, we end up falling short because we fall right off the road. Right, so that's what keeps me up at night. I think we've built system, and we have the intention to make sure that we're on top of it and can adapt and swerve in order to still be there and to still be delivering value. But making sure that we are is the thing that makes me go, maybe I should wake up at 4 a.m. and think about that.
Courtney?
I think the biggest thing for me is that I want to make sure that the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the people that come onto our platform are successful. So I'm spending a lot of time thinking about how to do that, working hard with our product and tech teams to make sure that we can deliver on that, and that we are giving them access to the funds that they need, and having the backers, the people that pledge money to back their projects, easily find them so that they can be successful.
Dr. Judge?
The why for me is, look, the technology industry is creating the highest numbers of jobs that we've seen in this generation. It's creating the most wealth that we've seen in this generation. And minorities are missing out, right? We only represent 3% of the venture funding, even though we're 30% of the population. So it's not off by like 5 to 10%, it's off by an order of magnitude, right? That's a $20 to $40 billion a year problem. What also happens is when you fund minority entrepreneurs, they actually also solve problems that are related to us, right? So I think about companies that we've invested in, like Vitable. He realized that people can't afford healthcare. He realized how to make a telehealth app so that you can deliver primary healthcare for $40 a month instead of $1,000 a month. Or companies like Isuzu that realize, a lot of minorities are renters, but we aren't getting credit on our credit building report for paying our rent on time. So they built a solution to go solve that. And there's, company after company after company like that. So as you fund more minority founders, it's not only the right thing to do, it's also the profitable thing to do. I mentioned we've invested $100 million so far into 75 minority companies. We're out raising a $200 million fund right now. But those 75 companies, they have created 6,100 jobs. They have $1.7 billion a year of revenue. They've raised over $4 billion of total funding, and they're valued collectively at over $20 billion. And so there's proof points that it works, and we just need to do more of it.
Real quick before the elder statesman speaks, do you have a number out there that kind of showcases the disparity in the amount of money, if you will? You said 20 billion, but give me an example of another fund that might have had a long-standing tenure and the gross difference between the amount of money that they've sort of created and the amount of jobs that they've provided, and how those two worlds, couldn't be more different but need to be more close to the same.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, you look at the U.S. venture capital funding market every year, it's about $150, $200 billion a year that goes into VC companies, VC-backed companies every year in the U.S. Black and Latinos combined, on average, last 5-10 years, receive about 3% of that, so about $5 billion. But we represent 30% of the U.S. population. So you take 30% times 200 billion, that should be $60 billion a year. We're getting $5 billion a year, right? And some people would say it's a pipeline problem. But if you look, for the last 5 years, Blacks and Latinos have represented 20% of computer science graduates every year in this country, right? So we're coding, right? Then you look at some of the top accelerators like Y Combinator, we represent about 21% Black and Latinos of all Y Combinator graduates over the last 5 years. So we're actually building companies. So how do you go from 30% of the population, 20% of computer science graduates, 20% of Y Combinator companies, down to 3% of venture capital funding? That gap is that $20 to $40 billion annual gap in funding going to minority companies. And then the downstream effect of that is that means less employee bases that look like us, less board of directors, fewer board of directors that look like us. And when the wealth creation happens and job creation happens, we're not participating around the table.
Les?
It's hard to top. So as the elder statesman, I'm doing what I'm doing not for resume value, but for eulogy value, so that when I'm in that casket and you're up at the podium talking about the schmuck who's in the casket behind you, you got good things to say, hopefully. But I'm fortunate enough to operate in a world which starts from where Paul starts, Dr. Judge, and gets to large cap kinds of companies. And so my objective is to make sure that when I enter those enterprises, I make sure I know what's going on, and when I leave them, I leave multiples of people who look and think like me in those places. That's my job. That's my role. Those are the shoulders I want to leave to be stood upon. So.
So we've enjoyed our discussion. Like I said, hope you all have taken notes. I'll leave you this quote that I think about all the time. The breeze of opportunity can come from any direction. You just have to be sensitive enough to recognize it. We have to realize that everything that we've talked about on the stage is right next to you wherever you are in your life. Oftentimes, we're not sensitive enough because we're not clued in or focused in order to capture that opportunity. So I would invite all of you to not only spend time with those that are next to you, but through your time here at Blackweek, to understand that that person next to you might be the next great founder that allows you to have your $100 million exit, your $100 million, your $1 billion opportunity, and an opportunity to build and grow a business, and then take our place here on the stage. Because for me, I'm here because he created an opportunity for me to be here, and just like Paul and Courtney and Damian. And so you all should be moving this way so that we can move that way. So thank you for everybody.